Welcome to the Life Vision Lab podcast. I am your host, Shwetha, and I'm really glad you're here. For those of you who've been following this podcast from the very beginning or have listened to a few episodes or maybe even all of them, you know that I have a deep interest in understanding everything human. Our bodies, our minds, our relationships, how we move through life, how we build careers, how we make money, and how we stay connected to ourselves while doing all of it. Over the course of this podcast, I've had some really incredible conversations with people working across psychology, leadership, wellness, spirituality, and healing. And if there's one thread that runs through all of them, it's this question of how do we heal and what does healing really mean? Not just physically, but emotionally, nervous system healing, and the level of identity. Today's conversation sits right at the heart of that inquiry. If you've ever felt trapped in your body, confused by symptoms, or frustrated by a diagnosis that didn't come with a roadmap, this episode is for you. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Erin, a naturopathic doctor, somatic experience practitioner, and a certified intuitive eating counselor. I've never heard that one before, so I'm so excited to dive deep in with her. She's also the creator of the Sacred Illness Blueprint, a framework that challenges how we think about illness, healing, and the wisdom of the body. Dr. Erin's journey began in her early 20s with a diagnosis of Crohn's disease, labeled incurable, with a prognosis that many would have accepted as final. But she didn't. Instead, she spent the next decade listening deeply to her body, to her nervous system, and to what illness might actually be asking of her. Today, her condition is in remission, and her work supports individuals navigating chronic pain, trauma, anxiety, depression, disordered eating, and so much more. This conversation is expansive, deeply human, and quietly radical. So let's begin. Dr. Erin, I'd love to start at the beginning and welcome to the Life Vision Lab podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm very honored to have this conversation with you today.
So, in your early 20s, you were diagnosed with Crohn's disease and told it was incurable. Can you take us back to that moment? What was happening in your body and what was happening internally for you at that?
Yeah. So, yes, I was kind of always sick to my stomach throughout my whole life. Like that was my area in my body where if something was happening or if I was stressed, that was the part where I felt it in my system. So I was no stranger to GI stuff. But when I was in high school, like sophomore through senior year, like toward the end of my high school career, I started to get just more and more and more sick as time went on. So I graduated, I started going to school, I went to college. I didn't know really who I was. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I wanted to study. So I bounced around from a bunch of different schools. And as I was doing that, I was just getting more and more and more sick. So eventually I stopped going to school. I dropped out. I moved back home and was really, bedridden a lot. I had very low energy. I couldn't really keep any food in. Everything was going right through me. I learned later that I was very anemic because of that. I wasn't absorbing any nutrients, so very anemic at the same time. So eventually went to the doctor because it was clear that there was something beyond the typical stomach ache going on. And that's where, after a series of tests and specialists and all the things, I was handed that diagnosis. So I really do see it as sort of an accumulation of my life leading up to that point. And I don't think it's any coincidence that happened at a point in my life where I was particularly lost. Just, really trying to figure out who I was and trying to navigate my way in the world. And my illness came in and stopped me in my tracks, essentially. Really rerouted my entire life, like my whole life, direction, path, everything changed from that point forward. So while my friends were partying and going to school and being 20, I was getting a colonoscopy and taking medicine and, laying in my parents' house. So it was a very big wake-up call for me because it was just so very unignorable how different my life was at that time.
So, what felt most confronting about receiving that diagnosis? Because I'm thinking when you went in and you got that diagnosis, it must have hit you with a ton of bricks. And so, did you immediately question it, or did that questioning come later?
I try to think back to that because what I always say is I grew up using conventional medicine, going to the doctor, doing the normal thing. No one in my family was alternative in any way, shape, or form. We didn't do anything
Mm.
different. We just did the medical system. And so I don't know why when I got that diagnosis, I think the thing that I kind of come back to is a big part of why I got sick was just this really profound way of being disconnected from myself, denying really what was going
Mm.
on in my body. And so I think when I got that diagnosis, I kind of categorized it in that same way where I was like, nope, that's not real. I'm fine. Look, don't worry about me. And just kept smiling and pushing through and that sort of thing. So there was that aspect to it. But I think it's this interesting, like, sort of dynamic where part of me was in denial. But the other side of it really was that I was saying to myself, like, this is not going to be my story. This is not my truth. This is not trajectory. Yeah, because, they were telling me you're going to take these medications for the rest of your life. You're probably going to have surgery. And so, yeah, there was just this part of me that just was like, no, that's not going to happen. So, again, I think it was this both and where there was the pattern of what made me sick, which was that self denial, self ignoring. But it was also kind of that, I don't know, there was something about that energy of just saying, that's not my story. And that's where it forced me onto a different path because it was like, okay, well, you can't really pretend like you're fine because you're clearly not, right? Like you're in a lot of pain. You can't do what your friends are doing. There's no way to just pretend like this isn't happening. So it was that it kind of forced me out of that, pretending like it was fine when it really wasn't place and into like, okay, if you're going to say it's fine, you actually have to find the path that makes it fine. So I started going to school and studying all the things, that led me to where I am now. But yeah, it was
Mm.
very devastating to receive that diagnosis. And I remember very vividly, I love my caregivers, but there was one person who was with me when I received that diagnosis, and I was born with a heart condition. So I was always kind of seen as like the kid with the health stuff or like,
Mm.
delicate or something was wrong with me. It was like a congenital abnormality in my heart. So then I
Mhm.
received this diagnosis and my caregiver said, "Oh, Erin, what happened to you?" Like, "Oh gosh, you're like just really imprinted this story of like you're so broken or it's something really bad happened to you or and so I think that really sat with me too of like there's something really wrong with me. And that diagnosis was like sort of the nail in that coffin of that story. And so of course that also became a big part of my healing as well to kind of work with that story and that imprint that had been put on me.
So walk me through the time when you said, nope, this needs to change. This is not my story. And what led you to becoming a naturopathic doctor?
Yeah. So I was at the time living at home, as I had said. I had just started to get some energy back. For all intents and purposes, the medications did help me feel better because they were suppressing my immune system. So they were just like shutting everything down in my gut. Crohn's disease is an autoimmune condition for those who don't know. So the number one treatment is to just suppress the immune system so it can't attack your
Right.
body. So I was feeling a little better as I started those medications, even though I didn't want to be on them forever, and I knew I wasn't going to be. So I started working at a farm because it was like summertime, no one was in school at that point anyway. And as I was working on this farm, the woman I was working with, just sort of planted this seed of, nutrition is a really big part of gut health. And so maybe you should look at food. And she was obviously very connected to food, growing food for people. So I decided to go to school for nutrition. And so this began the journey of trial and error. Like so much of my healing journey was just trying all of the things. And so it really started to open my worldview to there's so much more than Western medicine. There's so much more than just the pills and the surgery. Because that was my, rejection was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to walk that path, but I have no idea what else there is. And so nutrition was the first step on that path to trying something else, even though it's not radical. It was like, using something different than just medication. And I remember too, when I received that diagnosis at 20, I had the wherewithal to ask the doctor, well, what should I eat? Because it's my gut that is sick. And he said, don't worry about that. Just take your pills. So that also sort of stuck in my head. So like that story from the doctor, plus this woman saying like nutrition is important. I was saying, okay, then I'm
Mhm.
going to go to school and figure out like what I can do with that. And so, kind of I think what so many folks on a healing journey or with chronic illness can relate to is that a lot of things help some, but nothing got me like all the way there. I was really just, I kept asking that question of like, why is it here? Why is this happening? And so I went to school for nutrition. changed my diet, started eating differently. And like, yeah, it helped, but it didn't touch the why. It didn't change why I had Crohn's disease. It just helped me not feel so sick and helped to replete a lot of the nutrients I had lost. So then from there, I started getting interested in herbal medicine. So, alternative to drugs, taking herbs, just seeing how that might affect me. So for that, I traveled out to Washington State. I was living on the East Coast of the United States, moved to the West Coast, went to school out there. And that's where I got exposed to like all of the different alternative medicine that, in Seattle, it was like everything was there. And so I learned about all the things. And that's where I decided to go beyond with my herbal medicine training and start to study naturopathic medicine. So that's where I got into, yeah, just like it was just this quest of like, what's next? What's next? How do I learn more? How do I keep expanding my knowledge? Because nothing was, yeah, again, quite like getting the full picture. And it felt like learning everything I could about the body and illness and anatomy and physiology and all the things would really help me to get this big picture. So that's when I started that program out in Seattle.
At what point did you realize this wasn't just a physical condition, but a whole system asking for attention?
Yeah. So the school I went to is Bastyr University. And while I was there, so I started the doctorate program, and I think it was like year 2 or 3. You have, as with any program, you have to take so many elective courses. And
Mhm.
there was a course on mind-body medicine, and it just spoke to me. Like I read the description. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Never heard of that before. Guess I'll check that out. And so I took it, and it was just like light bulbs going off. Like, it's just one of those things when you have that sense in your body of like, this is something. I don't know what it is, but this is something. And so I, from there, took like every mind body course offered. I got certified in something called biofeedback. So that was sort of my first
Mm.
modality that I was trained in for mind body medicine specifically. So it was during that time when I was studying that I started to kind of apply what I was learning to myself and started to, yeah, like tune into my body in this different way of like, okay, so if the mind and the body are connected and the mind is influencing the
Okay.
body, what is my mind doing to my body? What is my body holding? What is my nervous system up to? What is that connection? So it was during those last couple of years at Bastyr that I started to really learn that a whole other world of like, it's not just physical, there's this whole other level and layer to illness that is manifesting physically, but that's not necessarily where it starts. And for me, that's not where it started. It was not a physical cause. It was the mental, emotional, mind, body realm where my illness came from. So that was like where the big pivot started. And then I just kind of took it and went with it from there.
Now, I want to talk about the term sacred illness because I feel like everything you just shared kind of flows into why you've named it as Sacred Illness Blueprint. Because honestly, it stopped me in my tracks when I read
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's sort of my style, to be a little evocative in that way. So, yeah, because you certainly don't typically see those two words side by side or think of illness as sacred
Yeah.
or good or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, on my journey through everything that I learned and, eventually putting my Crohn's disease into remission, which is, I think of it as cured because I don't have to take medications. I never had to have surgery. I don't have any symptoms at all. Like, do not meet the qualifications for that illness anymore. Um, and what that journey taught me is like, it taught me who I really am. Like through the work I did on my mind and my body and figuring out what my illness really was holding, I found parts of myself that I had shoved away and stuffed away. I uncovered traumatic experiences. I understood how my nervous system was orienting in this like survival people pleaser kind of way. Going back to what I was saying about like, I'm fine, everything's fine, just shove it in. That was my way of being my whole life. And so it started to make sense, like why I had stomach aches my whole life and why my body was always so uncomfortable. And so it just really, it was my illness that was this wake up call. And like I said, it stopped me in my tracks at 20. It redirected my whole life path and it eventually led me back to myself. And so that's why I think of illness as, I'm never going to say that it's not uncomfortable, and I would never wish illness on anyone because, firsthand experience that it's terrible and not it's not something that we want to go through. But I think if we can start to change our mindset about what it actually is it can help bring meaning to something that can otherwise feel very meaningless and very senseless and very unfair. If I had never gotten sick, I don't know how life would have kind of pushed me to find myself, because I think life is always trying to get us to uncover certain aspects of ourselves or to get on a certain path. But my illness was the thing that did that for me. And so that's my mission now, is to teach this sacred illness paradigm, which is to say your illness is here for a reason. It's not, again, not random. It's not senseless. It's not, I think so many times we're told like, well, we don't know why that happens, or the body just does that, or whatever it is. And that's not truly the explanation. There's so much more than meets the eye. And when we can tune into that deeper meaning, it opens our whole life up. And I think that's the biggest pivot, is that illness is not the end of life, as it's the end of life as we know it, but it's actually opening the door to so much more. So that's why I put those
Yeah,
words.
basically, I mean, illness carries an
Yes.
intelligence without romanticizing the suffering that comes with it,
Right.
right? So trying to keep things separately and look at illness as an intelligence, because what changes when we stop asking what's wrong with me and start asking what is my body actually trying to communicate with me right
Yep.
now. It really changes the narrative, where you can really focus on then healing, which is what you did, because you built curiosity into your day to day, and you just got deeper and deeper into learning. And now obviously you're helping lots of people do the same
Mhm.
with that.
Yeah, it's an empowering mindset shift, because I think it can feel very powerless when we receive a diagnosis, especially like for myself, when I was told it's incurable. I mean, that feels like a sentence, right? It's like, oh, so I'm going to have this for the rest of my life. For me, it was like, yeah, you're going to be on medications, you're going to have surgery. Like, it was just this really kind of dreary outlook. And I know so many of us receive that kind of prognosis. And so that's how I kind of talk about that, is the diagnosis is correct, or it can be correct, and it can help to just understand physically what's going on in your body. But the prognosis is the story that we get to write. That's the part that we get to figure out for ourselves, because yes, the prognosis that we're handed is typically the average result that people follow if they follow a certain path. But that doesn't mean that it has to be our path. Like, we know there's outliers always. And what I find is, if we tune into that deeper meaning of illness, we tend to be one of those quote unquote outliers. We tend to find that different path. And really, I think it kind of brings to question, like, is the prognosis that we're given, is that the average outcome just because we're told that's what to expect, versus being told, like, this is your diagnosis. Let's figure out what this means for you as a unique person, and with your unique life and your unique story and experiences. How do we help you heal as an individual, versus this is everyone who gets this illness, this is what you should do,
It's going to be.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's taking it down to that individual level and really taking it from there.
Central part of your work sort of integrates, not sort of, it does integrate somatic experiencing and nervous system regulation. So for someone listening who feels stuck in symptoms even after doing all the right things, what role does the nervous system play in chronic illness and pain?
Yeah, as you said, it's everything. Really, it's the central driving force. So to try to put it down to like an elevator speech, I mean, the nervous system, if you think of it as like the central computer, to put it in like unsexy terms, of the body, and it is literally connected to every single cell in your system. And so the nervous system, its primary job is to keep us safe and alive. And so whether we're conscious of it or not, it is constantly scanning the environment for, are you safe or not? Are you safe or not? And then on top of that, it's learning. It's learning what makes us unsafe, what hurts us, what is going to harm us, and it responds accordingly. And so this is where trauma and stress really impacts our system, because our nervous system is remembering, like, okay, that thing was terrible. That can never happen again. Let's get ready just in case it does. And so life, certain experiences, stress, again, chronic stress, chronic traumatic experiences, all of those things start to program our nervous system to really shift into this state of getting ready to fight or to flight, right? Like, we are familiar with fight or flight. When we shift into
Yeah.
that state, when it's chronically sort of like, we're not safe, where's the threat, we know we have to be ready based on past experiences. That's not a state in which healing can happen. And so if we're chronically in that state of like getting ready to fight, getting ready to flight, then we're chronically in a physiological state in which our whole body is like doing something different than it's supposed to. It's away from baseline. Our gut shuts down, our muscles are tight, our immune system's suppressed. Like, it's one of my things I like to harp on is that if you look at chronic illnesses and the symptoms of chronic illnesses, it's everything that you would see happening when you shift into fight or flight, like long term. Like, that's the result of chronic fight or flight is chronic symptoms that you see. And so that's it. And that's why, and that's how it's connected. And again, it's, it manifests physically and we get a diagnosis. And so sort of like focused on like, well, that's my illness. Then it's my gut or it's this or it's that. But really, you get back further, it's the nervous system driving the manifestation of that illness.
Because that was going to be my next question for you, right? Where does the unresolved trauma where is it stored in the body? What does it actually mean at the physiological level?
Yeah. So this is where I feel like there's this blurred line between science and whatever you want to call that. I mean, I know we're learning more and more about this, but generally speaking, it's in the brain, right? Like, our brain is remembering events, and that's what's causing the nervous system to have that response. My question is why certain people manifest it in their gut or in their muscles or, like where it shows up, because two people can face the same traumatic experience and have a completely different physical reaction to it. So that's the interesting part to me. And when I do somatic work with people, which that word means a million things to a million people, but the way that I do my somatic work is I literally talk to a person's body. I have them communicate with their illness. And so, like, if we're talking to someone's tight muscles in their shoulder, a certain traumatic experience might be held in that shoulder. And it might be like a specific, like, related to that arm, or it might be just totally random and not really make sense for that spot. So that's where, I think that's where it sort of blurs that line between, like, I mean, there's not literally like a thing here. You couldn't run a lab and see something there. But when you talk to the body, there's usually very specific things that certain parts of the body are storing. And I know there's other systems of medicine that can explain that in certain ways. But so, it's like it's in the brain. We know it gets programmed into the mind, but then it manifests, and there's certain stories and certain memories and experiences held in the tissues at various places throughout the body. So I don't know how to answer that, but that's how I talk about it.
It basically means it is stored in the body, but it's different for different people depending on each body type, right? No, that was really helpful. So now you've supported so many clients using the sacred illness blueprint. What tends to be the biggest realization clients have when they begin this work?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that paradigm shift of seeing that their illness is not random. It's not a failure of their body. It's not genetics, like it's this very specific story and experience that their body is holding. I mean, I think it's like light bulbs going off, because really, I think a lot of us, I think this is intuitive. Like, I think this is a language and an understanding and a connection we used to have, and we've lost it. And I've yet to work with someone who, when I guide them in to talk with their body, where they could not have that conversation. Like, it's very easy actually to get someone to just tune in and have that chat. And so I think it's that, like, sort of recognizing how easy and how readily available that knowledge is when we know how to tune in. And I think the other thing too is just that recognizing how intelligent the body is, and how actually illness is the body working for us, not against us, because it's the body holding on to things that we did not know how to process at that time it was happening. We didn't have the skills, the support, the resources. And so, it's the body keeps the score, right? We know that book, that phrase. The body's holding on to things and doing its best with the things that we're giving it, because we were not able to process it. And so it's really this, like, again, it's like changing that paradigm of your body loves you. It's working as best as it can. And now actually this sacredness of your illness is saying, like, tune in, please pay attention, because whatever this is holding, it needs your attention now. Like, you need to help hold this and process this. And it, the timing is always interesting. That's a whole other topic, just like when it happens. But yeah, it's that mindset shift, I think, is huge for people.
Yeah. And so I'd say that is what surprises people the most, I'm sure, when you start working with them too, right?
Yes.
Out of your own transformation emerged the sacred illness blueprint. Without giving too much away, what is this framework really about, and how does it support people differently than conventional
Yeah.
approaches?
So the blueprint, basically, I was working with a business coach and she was like, your story is pretty powerful. You should probably teach it. And it's interesting because I never thought of it that way, even though I know like my illness was gone and blah, blah, blah. But I was practicing as more of a traditional naturopath at the time. And so she really put me on the path to mapping out the blueprint of my own journey, which is why I call it the blueprint. So I just sat down and I
Mhm.
thought of like, what steps did I take? Like, how did I get from where I was to where I am? And so it ended up being sort of a 9-step process. And I liken it to the hero's journey, like Joseph Campbell. I think that's his name, right? Yeah, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. So there's just this process of going basically into the underworld. If you think about any heroic tale, like Luke Skywalker, his aunt and uncle get murdered and then he becomes a Jedi and has to do all this training. Like that's a hero's journey. And so we face certain challenges along the way in order to emerge back up as a new person. So the journey I think of is, like you said, not to like go through it in full detail. There's kind of 3 solid phases. The first phase is really just that phase of understanding what is your body holding. And so I start out
And
like really educating people about trauma, about the nervous system, how everything we were just talking about, like how that happens and how the nervous system is impacted, and helping people start to excavate the stories that their body is holding. So the first phase is just of like getting the knowledge and getting the information of like, okay, what's my body doing and what is this illness here for? The next phase is the hardest. This is sort of the dark night of the soul, belly of the beast thing, where we are facing all of those things that we have held in our body and working to rewrite them. And that is the hardest part because it's all the things that we've like pushed away and ignored because of trauma. So it's these beliefs of like, I'm a failure, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, there's something wrong with me, all of that stuff, right? So it's all the things that we're holding in our system in response to our trauma that we're being asked to now look at, which is uncomfortable, and
right,
start to rewrite it and rewire it. So really, again,
right,
from like
right.
a scientific perspective, this is a process of reprogramming your nervous system to let the
Mhm.
trauma go and to shift your nervous system back to a place of safety. So that's a very hard
Right.
place to be, and it's hard to do that without knowing you're there. There's a lot of resistance, a lot of fear. So once you get through that phase, then the third phase is embodying that new person. So once you have the new stories and the new ways of orienting to your life and understanding yourself, then it's okay, then now what does your life look like? Like how do you hold yourself? How do you embody yourself? How do you walk the talk basically and talk the walk? Like how do you just be that person? And I think that's a part that a lot of us skip too because we do a lot of this. Yeah, so that's the final phase is just stepping into that person. And there's like parts about forgiveness and just like releasing the past in order to step forward into your new self.
Beautiful. And can you share one client story with us that got you quite, I think, excited to work with, and also quite, I think, shocked when you actually heard the client story, and then how did you turn things
Yeah,
around?
so I was working with someone with chronic pain, and she, yeah, like, kind of similar trajectory as me, had tried medication, had gotten the diagnosis. And chronic pain is so tricky because it's one of those things where we're often told like, oh, yeah, this is just how it's going to be, right? I'm told it's chronic, it's
Mhm.
forever. We don't know why it's caused, why it's happening. Take this medication, take these muscle relaxers, etc. So she had been down that whole route, and we started doing this work together. And I mean, it's so interesting. Sometimes it's very metaphorical. Like she, there was like an image of being stabbed in the back by people who loved her, and she had all this back pain. So just sometimes it's very straightforward. It like literally, it's because you feel like you're being stabbed in the back. That's why you have back pain. Sometimes it's not like that. So we worked to release all of that feeling of betrayal and being stabbed in the back and just being harmed by the people she thought she could trust. And, this was like, how old was she? She was probably in her 40s. And so at that point, the pain was probably a 20-year-old experience. And it's gone now. Like she doesn't have any back pain anymore and doesn't need medications. Like and it's one of those things where like once it's gone, you forget how bad it was. But yeah, I mean, she
Mm.
was taking a lot of medications when I met her. So yeah, that was a really just powerful, straightforward, like easy in a sense. Like once we got in there, it was really easy for her to like process that stuff and let it go. And her body just let it go from that point forward. So that was, yeah. And yeah, go
What?
ahead.
Sorry, I'm just shocked by even listening to that because you said sometimes it could be so literal, right? With what you shared on, she felt like someone was stabbing her back and that pain was coming from there. What about several women today? And I'm sure you've had enough of them come to you with irregular periods, with reproductive issues, with, a lot of feminine energy challenges on the whole, right? So what would you say to
Yeah,
that?
yeah. So the feminine, I feel like sometimes that is more related to matrilineal lineage, like mother wound or grandmother line. I think everyone I've worked with, I'm thinking of 3 people who've had like fibroids or like uterine issues or even uterine cancer. There was something to do with the matrilineal line. One woman in particular was holding a lot of trauma in her uterus from her mother's experience with her mother and her grandmother. And it was this feeling of, I mean, I think a big part of chronic illness too is there's this invitation to break cycles, to break ancestral things that we've brought into this lifetime from our lineage. And this woman in particular, knew that her mom, her grandmother, her great, like all up the mother line, there was this silencing that was happening to them and, them not expressing themselves and being in abusive marriages. And so this client I was working with had this experience of having these massive fibroids in her uterus. And when we like went in and talked to it, that's what it was. It was like you're holding what no one else could process, basically. Like you're holding this in your body. So I wouldn't say across the board it is related to that, but that's been my experience that it's typically related to something like that. But I think that's the thing to keep in mind is I think there are like themes that can be generalized across illnesses, but everyone's is going to be unique. And so, there's books that you could look at, like if you have this, it means you're holding this in your body. I haven't found that to be true 100%. So I think it can be a helpful starting place. But yeah, any illness could be literally anything, but there can be generalizations. So I don't know if that's helpful to say it that way because it's kind of both and.
Oh, that was really
Yeah.
helpful because I've noticed in my own circles where there have been women, many women, actually, including myself, who've had extreme sort of chronic episodes with, periods and just cases of hysterectomy, cases of how they really suffered through a lot of pain. But people who actually went through hysterectomy, for me, it was basically walking through my emotional traumas that regularized my period. Who would,
Yep.
like, everything, all medication possible. And then it was therapy and it was just learning how to slow down that really got my periods, regularized, right? But then I know of people who've had hysterectomy, fibroids, etc., but they've become completely different people after the hysterectomy, completely changed, and so much more themselves, right? And so sometimes you wonder of how is it that there's a part of your body as a woman that's taken away from you, but yet you're still the best version of yourself.
Yes. And I love that you're speaking to that because that's something that I'm very vocal about is I think we can get so dogmatic of like, oh, I have to be all holistic or all natural, or like if I have to have surgery, I failed in some way, shape, or form, or I don't know, whatever that mentality is. And I can't think of a single person I'm working with, and I'm working with a lot of people right now who is just doing what I'm doing. Like a lot of them are getting surgery. I have a person who's on a transplant list for chronic kidney failure. And yeah, hysterectomies, medications, like you name it, people are doing lots of different things to support themselves. And I think that's truly holistic care, is to bring in the best of all worlds and, working on that root cause. But yeah, if you're taking that part of your body out, you're literally like offloading what that part of your body was holding. It's freeing you from that burden your body was holding. And, the patient that I was talking about with the fibroids, she had a hysterectomy and she, yes, like night and day, not only physically, mentally, emotionally, like was able to like kind of snap into place, but not to mention the extreme like anemia she could never get past because of all the heavy bleeding that happens with fibroids and just, so there's so many benefits to it. But I think she was also, it was also interesting for both of us because I worked with her before and after the hysterectomy. She was still able to connect with what her uterus was holding, even though it wasn't there. Sort of that energy of, what was being held in that part of her body was still there, energy, whatever you want to call it. So we were still able to work with anything residual that was there post, which wasn't much because we had done a bunch of work before. The surgery took it out. But anything that was kind of like left, we were able to just like, whoop, like move it out of her system. So I think that's something folks need to know too, is just because you had a surgery doesn't mean you like missed your chance. Like you can still work with that
Right.
part of your body. Like it's
Or you're less whole,
no,
or
yeah,
there's a problem,
right.
right? Like, 'cause, again, when all the women I've met who had a hysterectomy, and I know at least 4 of them, every one of them is a happier
Mhm.
person after that. And I am like, wow, okay, there's a part of your body that literally distinguishes you as a woman, right? Like you really identify
Mhm.
yourself as a woman with that body part. And y'all seem completely okay without it. And they're like, oh my God, it's done. Then we just feel like different people
Yes.
now.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I think that's it. It's not seeing a part of you as like I have to keep this, or I don't know. I think that's the trap people get into of feeling like they have to keep a part because it's like not natural or not, that's part of my femininity or whatever that is. And yeah, I really am a big advocate for like if it makes sense for you, if that's going to bring the most relief to your system, please, like by all means. And I think there's a line we have to walk because I know, at least in the States, we're very like go to the top most extreme therapy first. And, like women are just like doing the hysterectomy first stop versus, are there other options? Sometimes there are. So I think it's finding that line between like not just immediately going to the surgery or immediately going to this or that. If in your body you feel like that feels extreme to me, but that's what they're telling me to do. If it feels right, please, by all means, like it's your body, do what feels good to you. So if that makes sense, I feel like there's this line of like not just like being so surgery happy, but also not avoiding it at the same time. Like there's a time and a place for
Right.
sure.
Finding that
Yes.
balance. Yeah, no, absolutely. And so thank you, Dr. Erin. Before we close, I want to bring this back to the listener. If someone listening right now is in physical pain, emotional distress, or feeling deeply disconnected from their body, what is one thing you'd want them to hear
Yeah.
today?
So I think the most important way to frame that for you is that your body is talking to you. This is a communication. And the reason it hurts so bad is because it really wants your attention. Like truly, like the louder illness gets, the more, I guess, what's the word? The more persistent it is, it's because it really wants you to tune in. Like it really needs you to stop in your tracks and to tune into your body. I mean, I think about my own journey, like the stomach aches were uncomfortable, but it wasn't enough to stop me in my tracks. Crohn's disease did. I could not move past that.
Yeah.
And so like
Right.
it's holding that both and of acknowledging like this is super uncomfortable. I hate it and I wish this wasn't happening. And there's an opportunity here for you to tune in and not seeing this as an end of your life, but it's actually a door that's opening for you if you choose to open it. That can really truly, and I'm not like, trying to sugarcoat it at all. Like it can truly lead you to the most beautiful life that you could have, because there are parts of you that are asking to be seen and healed and brought back to the surface, reintegrated, loved again, that got shut off, got suppressed, got shut up in childhood or, beyond. So trying to see it as a communication, trying to get curious about it, acknowledging the pain, but also trying to get curious to just open up to that question of what is my illness asking of me? What is it saying to me? And kind of seeing where it goes from there.
Saying, Dr. Erin, thank you for your honesty, your depth, and the way you invite people to see their bodies not as broken, but as wise. Again, thank you for clarifying what sacred illness is. As I said, it did stop me in my tracks when I heard it. But this conversation is such a powerful reminder that healing isn't about fixing ourselves. It's about listening more deeply and responding with compassion. So for everyone listening, if this episode resonated with you, I invite you to pause for a moment. Notice what your body is responding to and let that be enough for today. And we'll include links to Dr. Erin's work and the Sacred Illness Blueprint in the show notes below. If this conversation supported you, please share it with someone who might need it. And don't forget to subscribe to the Life Vision Lab podcast. Until next time, stay curious, stay gentle with yourself, and keep listening inward.